It's been less than 24 hours now since Rankavili was found and his body was taken back over to Israel, to his family. However, violence reportedly still continues in the Gaza Strip, with 4 people being killed today. What do you have to say about this? And have you heard of anything about why this has indeed happened, given the fact that now all eyes are on moving on to that phase 2 part of the deal?
I hate to disappoint Thomas, but it really is hard to know what to make of this because, I mean, Hamas lies through its teeth. We have no idea who these people are. The Israeli army refuses to comment on violence that happens in this delicate stage. We have no real solid information coming from inside Gaza, and there's no foreign correspondents allowed into Gaza, which the FPA in Israel, which I was formerly the chairman of and am still associated with, is appealing to the Supreme Court in Israel. So it's a little bit of a news desert. And what we clearly see is that there continues to be sporadic, periodic, but consistent violence. And it reflects that the war was over in a way, but isn't really over totally. And that's because the second phase of the Trump 20-point ceasefire plan has not been implemented. It awaits a number of things. It awaited the return of all the hostages, and that has now been achieved in tragic fashion because so many were returned as bodies, but it was achieved. And it awaits the disarming of Hamas, and Hamas is agreeing to hand over power to the technocratic government and the so-called Board of Peace, all of which have been set up and are pretty much waiting. And you speak of deaths by cold in Gaza. Of course, these are people living in tents and in ruins. And the reconstruction of Gaza, again, is pretty much there, ready to happen. But nothing significant is going to go in until Hamas is gone. Now, this is a strange situation because Israel is not being allowed to resume the war by Trump. And Israel doesn't really want to resume the war. No one really thinks that the Palestinian Authority or the technocratic government or the international stabilization force yet to be created are going to go in and disarm Hamas. This has to be done of their volition. And I don't know of a precedent for a jihadist group disarming voluntarily. So basically, anyone who wants to see an end to the death and the violence in Gaza should be putting pressure on Hamas to agree to do this, as theoretically they have agreed by accepting the 20-point plan. It's basically as simple as that, and we shall see what happens. I know that there are negotiations happening behind the scenes. For example, Hamas is talking to the PA. That will basically be the new government in Gaza under the guise of the technocratic government, and that little trick is to satisfy Israel, whose extreme right government doesn't want it to be called the PA. We know that they're asking the PA to accept 10,000 of their police officers into the new police force of Gaza. No, Israel just sees them as Hamas members and they're going to oppose it. But this kind of trickery for some and elegant solution for others might be part of the path towards sort of somehow achieving partial or sufficient disarming of Hamas so that reconstruction can begin and the new governance of Gaza can commence.
And just briefly, Dan, of course, we saw that the return of that last hostage within the last 24 hours. The clock in Tel Aviv Square that became a rallying point for Israelis has officially been turned off after 844 days since October the 7th. What's the general feeling in Israel now about moving forward with this plan and the attitude towards the upcoming plans in terms of a technocratic force leading in Gaza?
Well, Israel breathes a huge collective sigh of relief at the end of the hostage crisis. Remember that there had been bodies held in Gaza ever since the 2014 war, a much smaller war, but it was considered significant at the time. So this is the first time in 12 years or so that there are no Israelis, alive or dead, being held in Gaza. And for Israelis, it's a very, very, very big deal. It essentially constitutes the fulfillment of, in a way, of one of the 2 goals of Israel's launching of the war in Gaza after Hamas sparked it by invading Israel and massacring over 1,000 people. on October 7th. The other being the removal of Hamas. So it's bittersweet for Israelis because, of course, the saga ends with the return of a body of a young man who was 24. Quite heroic young man, actually, who was didn't even need to be in the Gaza area and rushed to the defense of his fellow citizens. And it was essentially the first to go in and the last to come out. So quite a story. For Israelis, it's a very big deal. But remember that there was a strong majority in Israel already a year and a half or so ago for ending the war and getting the hostages back. The government insisted on prolonging the war in order to fully finish off Hamas. They prolonged the war, devastated Israel's international standing, caused all this death and destruction to continue, including deaths of Israeli soldiers and deaths of hostages, and didn't even finish off Hamas. So, I mean, Israelis are happy to have the hostage situation over, but not particularly happy with how everything went down. And for the government of Israel, it's extremely awkward because they're facing elections coming up, and you have the situation I just described.
Yeah.
They're kind of depending on Trump to engineer a removal of Hamas from the territory, and then it'll start to look like a little bit more of a success.
Dan Perry, as always, it's a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for coming.